So which companies could be hit the hardest by all of this, and who might be least impacted? Joining me now on the CNBC Newsline is Jason Bazinet. He's a managing director at Citi. Jason, it's great to have you, and maybe let's start with who could be least affected by all the potential changes that are coming.
Well, there were four companies mentioned in the House report: Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook. One big tech company that was notably absent was Microsoft. And so that directionally is good news, I would say, for Microsoft. Among the four that were mentioned, Apple at least came up the least number of times in the report. So I would say that would be the area I'd focus on.
I think Apple was also the only company favorably mentioned in the report summary for the way that the iPhone has changed our lives. So again, to your point, that might be some good news for investors. How big of a deal is this news that we got from the FCC yesterday that Ajit Pai is looking at writing some rules around Section 230? What do you think is going on there?
Well, I think the Republicans are clearly a bit concerned about what they perceive as sort of a bias with some of the social media platforms. I think the rub is that Section 230 essentially gives legal, immunity to liability for these social platform companies, and if the government comes out and removes that, you could actually see the paradoxical effect of more censorship, if you want to call it that, or culling of stories as opposed to less. So it's put the administration, I think, in a little bit of a quandary in terms of whatever they do with Section 230. They have to be very careful because they could make it worse rather than better.
Well, I mean, it also depends on what you mean by worse. By all means, if the companies act more like traditional publishing companies, that's totally in their, discretion to do. The issue that I would ask you is if they're suddenly liable as a result for all of the content on their platforms, how can they possibly exist anything like in their current form?
Well, that's what I mean, is that, if there isn't that legal protection, then they're going to end up calling more stories, right? And so you're going to end up with, less degrees of freedom, if you will, in terms of what's allowed on social media. So whatever the administration does or the FCC, I just think they have to be careful. One potential thing would be to go back to something like the fairness doctrine, where maybe there's some record of what's pulled down from the sites, and you ensure that it's balanced across the political spectrum.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.